The buttons. Okay. All right. Hi, welcome. Let's start with the roll call, and then we can approve the agenda.
Brian?
Here.
Tyler?
Here.
Kim?
Here.
John and
Here.
Beth? Here. All present.
All right. And do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved. Second.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right. Stands approved. We are doing the work session. And then, Lindsay, if you want to kind of kick us off. Or?
Yep. We were just talking a little bit before you got here. I think that there's going to be a good discussion tonight about just some of the different things as far as our priorities. And we're going to turn it over to Jim and John, and they're going to lead us through some of the facilitation for that. So we're glad to have you guys back. Had an opportunity, the board did, to meet you the other night at the board meeting, and looking forward to our session tonight.
Good, thank you. Thank you for having us both back again, and thank you for making 4 o'clock work. I was very impressed that you could do that, so thank you very much. I hate to start with an apology, but I have to be back in Colfax, so about 5 or so, I'm going to excuse myself. John, if we're not finished by then, John will continue. Our hope is, collectively, that we can kind of get there. Thank you for the opportunity again to do this important work with your district. Both of us have done a number of these, so we appreciate the opportunity. You could have gone anywhere. So to select Heartland and to give us the opportunity to be a part of your community and what your groups are going to do means a lot to us. So we appreciate that confidence in us as a group. Speaking of confidence then, one of the most critical pieces of this is the product that you as a board would like to see come out of this work. Nothing is worse to go into a community meeting, at least the times I facilitated, without a clear purpose as to why we are there. Because the folks you're inviting and whomever else might join us are going to be giving up something, whether it was last night's Monday night football game or Dancing with the Stars or just being with their families or whatever it might be. They're going to sacrifice something on your direction because you want something from your community. And so the clarity of purpose for us will be very important, whether it's one of you introducing us and telling the group, this is why we brought you together as a board representative, board president, superintendent, however you do it, we brought you here tonight for this purpose. So that clarity will be very important as to what we need to do with that. So we talk about what's the purpose behind this. The second piece is the facilitation, basically, of what we do, the process that we would use. That we'll work on. I don't think you need to worry about that. It will make sure that everybody's voice is in the room, that they have an opportunity to participate and comment should they choose to do that. It can happen a lot of different ways, but so much of it is built on what you want to have at the end of this, which brings us to that third P about the product. So if I were to start with the end in mind tonight, I would just ask you to take a few moments, most of you have brought in paper, and I'd like you just individually to think about what would that look like if we came back, or however we choose to present, it doesn't have to be us. But if John and I came back and we said, you know what, here's our timeline, we'll get that to all of you, but we've got that point now, that board meeting date or workshop session, and you said you wanted the product. What would that look like to you? What is it? And to get there, you're going to have to think about why we're bringing the group together. Don't worry about the middle piece. That's our job. Why did we bring people together, and what do we hope to have? And I'm just going to pick May, for example. It could be March, it could be February, I don't care. I'm just saying May 1st, we come back to you. What would you like to have that's going to do what you believe needs to be done at this point in the district, as it pertains to priorities, goals, vision, whatever you want to. So give it, if you can, just 2 or 3 minutes. Think about what that would look like, and we'll kind of go around and make sure we hear everybody and what you have to say. About another minute or so, if you could, so we... It's not easy work, I understand.
Don't start.
It's not a test.
Don't just start on that side.
Okay, I gotta admit, I was leaning left here a little bit. I was, so okay, all right.
She brought it up, you should put it on the
I
side.
should, I just... And by the way, while you're finished, these answers. No, exactly, John hit the nail on the head. There's no wrong answers here. It's getting us all where we want to be and then talking about the role of the board in this whole process, the role of the administrators and the community when we put this whole thing together as we facilitate it for you. So rather than put someone on the spot, is there anybody who would like to go first? Again, knowing there's no wrong or right answers. And somewhere in here, I hope you all understand, there's going to be a compromise about, okay, yeah, I can support what it is we've decided as a board. And that's the other thing I want to say. John and I aren't here to direct this. A conversation really needs to occur around your five and your administrator here. So we're going to try to facilitate that as well. So we don't have a prescription. We've looked at all of the things you've done. We found real quality in all of the work you've done, but now we need direction from you as a board. So somebody want to start then, so I don't put anybody on the spot, and then we'll just pick you off one by one. Don't be timid. Okay,
start.
thank you.
I guess the deliverable that I think we would definitely need is clarity of what I'll call medium-term priorities. And I'm actually describing that as 3 to 5 years. I think the board, I think, is open. I'm open to a different way to approach it, but we've tried over the last few years to try to make sure that those were clear so that our annual goals could kind of line up with that. With that, I think it would be great in the process to try to capture what would maybe be some vision of long-term. And now I'm talking 10 to 25. In other words, if we have time, and maybe we don't in this go-round, but maybe you could in a few years, you go, oh, thinking about the unique things, the unique needs, the unique opportunities of Gilbert, what does that look like 10 or 20 years from now?
Okay.
And then the last thing I'll say is I think I'd like to see all of this kind of in a framework of that, which is what's unique about Gilbert. I like the conversations we've been having, but Brian even brought this up, I don't know, several meetings ago, maybe 3-4 months ago, is let's be careful not to go through an exercise and come up with the same words or the same things that you could pick almost any other district in the United States and go, well, they got the same stuff. So I'd like to see a framework that says, let's make sure we capture the unique elements of Gilbert, our proximity to Iowa State and all of its resources, ag, STEM, whatever. The fact that we've, I think, got a pretty unique, highly educated parent base. Let's figure out how we can engage them more in our school and be open to the fact that parents are really willing to help in this district. And then just again, what opportunities do we have with this exercise to distinguish Gilbert? I think that, to me, that'd be almost the challenge point in all the meetings. Is this really getting at what's unique about Gilbert rather than coming up with the same words that everybody else does?
Thank you, Tyler. Appreciate it very much. Someone else, please. We'll hear everyone, and then we'll kind of go back and see what we hear that's in common.
I don't.
Thank you.
I don't disagree. I think that's right along the lines that I was thinking. A few things, I guess, where I would go, maybe in a slightly different direction. I guess I'm not so concerned with. I'm concerned with what we think is the best approach for now, looking forward into our future. In other words, like 3 to 5 versus 10 to 20. I think it's what we believe to be true and necessary now, and I think that they should be reviewed to a certain extent every year. You know, so I'm not sure. I don't know exactly how to split goals into 3 to 5 and then longer. That's all I'm saying. Not that it can't be done, but I just, I don't know that. I think then the only place that I might veer a little bit differently, and this could be Tyler's intent, but to me it's what leverages what's unique about Gilbert. I believe that our students and I want them to be ready for what's after high school, whether that's work, school, whatever that is. But I don't think that's different from what other schools are trying to accomplish. I think maybe how we can accomplish that might be different because of the uniqueness of Gilbert. Right, I don't think that the workplace is looking for something very different in 120 graduates from Gilbert than it is from those graduates from Ames, etc. But I think we have means and folks that are here that maybe might help us accomplish those goals in a unique way.
Okay,
So
great. Thank you.
that's what I would say.
Great, thank you. We have 3 folks left. Who would like to go next?
I can go ahead. I mean, I wrote a sentence that has kind of 4 components to it, and what I think is, what I really want is a meaningful and unique vision or priorities that fits Gilbert in a way that's clarifying, long-lasting, and actionable. And so I can unpack that a bit. When I say meaningful, what I mean is something that's a little bit scary. Like we're gonna have, we have to aspire to, we have to long for it, but not impossible. And I think the uniqueness of it, what I mean is, I don't mean a novelty, right? We have to pick some random words no one else has. But I do want it to be authentic, and we have to do deep work to get there, right? And I think that that's really important. I think I want it to be clarifying, which is it provides, like, you know, as this process unfolds, that it provides actionable direction for us, right? It's not prescriptive. Doesn't mean that, hey, it has to be this way, you got to do this way, but it's giving us a framework to evaluate all of our decisions around. And I think long-lasting, meaning that it's not something that we're going to flip-flop on at a yearly level, or, you know, probably even multiples of years, right? That this is something that over time could be refined, but it's a pretty steady course that we're going, unless the world radically changes. And so,
can you just read it again?
Oh yeah. So I said a meaningful and unique vision or priorities that fits Gilbert in a way that is clarifying, long-lasting, and actionable. And I'm happy to write down sort of the parentheticals that I added to that.
And meaningful, right?
Yeah.
Just
Yeah, so meaningful and unique vision that fits
Oh.
Gilbert, so it's authentic in a way that's clarifying, provides direction that is. It's long-lasting and has clear actions that come out of that. There's a lot in that one sentence, sorry.
That's okay. Appreciate it. Good. John or Kim?
Go ahead.
I wrote down that I would like us to produce a vision and mission, and really those 30,000-foot district priorities that all stakeholders can embrace and stand behind. I love what I'm hearing about using the resources in our communities and Iowa State, and but I feel very strongly about trying to pull even more of the district in, and I think that there are those people in our district who have not yet come to believe that their work or their opinions have value. I'd like to reach out to some of the folks who haven't come to the table yet, whether it's fear or their new families or whatever that may be. And I would like to produce something really that that we can communicate in a way that everyone in the district believes it, feels it, and that future boards can base all of their decisions on that piece of work.
John, please.
Kind of reach an agreement on, you know, what success looks like, you know, in 3 to 5 year time frame. You know, putting some out there and say, here's what we're shooting at, and if we don't make it, that's okay. But that we're going to be, you know, willing to have something to shoot at that we can articulate to folks. I think the speed of change in education is going to be lightning fast. And so as we think of this, I think we have to think of a process that is high on listening leadership, with the idea of how we're going to lead is by listening. And we need to push that down through our organization. And I'm not saying we're not doing it now. I'm just saying with the speed of change, we're going to have to ramp it up. And and how do we engage stakeholders in that listening leadership process? And what does that look like? And I can give you some broad ranges on what's in that, but that when we look at that 3 to 5 year, what vision success looks like, to me, for that to be successful is we are going to have to be very dynamic, because I think that's the world we're living in. And so what that has to have in it then is teaching kids how to learn more than what they learn. So getting away from test taking and test scores to these people have the competencies to you can give them something and let them run with it. And then success will look like to me is engaged teachers and engaged students. That from my experience as my kids leave high school is they're not engaged. And so what is it that we need to do to make it so that we can run the school, but yet people can run with their passions to be good learners, and that can look different for each student. So I know that's a lot, but
if nothing else, it's probably good for you to hear each other.
Right.
Yeah.
Because sometimes you may not have had the opportunity, and since this is kind of new process, so I'm glad that you did that. Lindsay, did you have anything you wanted to add? I just want to recognize you.
Thank you. There's a lot of things that have been said that I would have a similar opinion on. The thing that I'm looking at is, as we look at these, I looked at about 2 to 3 priorities that would last. I call the test of time the 3 to 5 years, so that we're not changing, at the drop of a hat. I know that we've had conversations with these gentlemen, and we've looked at it, and we call these the big rocks. As we're looking at this and we're putting them in there, the big rocks are the ones that we're going to stand for, and that's what we think Gilbert should be about. And I think that we've done that in some of these, but I think that it's good for us to at least be talking about it and saying, what is it that we feel is not just going to change like those annual goals do, those ones that are bulleted below. These are the ones that are going to stand the test of time and be worthy.
Okay. Good, thank you. So my question to all of you is, what did you hear your colleagues say? What are some consistent patterns or themes that ran through all 5 and 6 of your presentations? Do you think, if I say, okay, I think I've heard some things, but I'd like to see what you identify as, well, I guess we're kind of talking about what? What did you hear that we could start putting into a framework?
we all want a vision. I think that was consistent, or priorities, whatever you want to say that.
And that's an important piece in all of this, and one where you may or may not have planned to go. But again, your mission and vision statements are very important because they should direct the work of the district and the future of the district. Vision should be right out there, set that this is what it looks like if we do what we do every day very well. And here are the things we're going to do from where we are and what we do to where we want to be and what we envision. So Lindsay, pull out the vision and mission statement, which I haven't looked at yet, but those need to be formulated. What those do is just help all of our arrows, like we have 5 arrows right now, but they're going in a different direction to some degree. So how do we bring them, the community, the administrative team, the students, and whomever else, the community in general, like you said, ISU and all of that, how do we bring them into one large arrow that helps you get to where you want to be? So we heard about vision. What else did we hear about?
Community rings through.
Okay, community. So obviously you're on the right track. I think we could put that on the wall. You're on the right track in agreeing to the fact that you'd like to have community input to help you and assist you with the direction and vision of the district. Is that a fair way to put that? Doesn't have to be exactly that wording, but you have a high value on your community. You're telling me that maybe they feel disengaged to some degree, that they have a lot of assets that they could bring to the table to assist you a little bit. There's more ownership buy-in in doing that and energizing them, the community, the teachers, and the staff as well. So community's pretty big from what I'm hearing. What else did you hear?
I heard from most that I think we're looking for the principles that will help us to guide our decisions to make sure that we stay kind of directionally true.
So one of the outcomes of this would be then I'm running down the road a little bit here. One of the outcomes would be that this would be in front of you at your conversations at the table, and that it would direct your conversations and decisions. So you want something that you can say, is this one of our priorities, for example? And if it's not, then the question becomes, why did you bring it to the table if it isn't helping us get down the road of where we want to be? Fair enough? Is that fair? So you'd like to have something that will give you guidance as a board. And what I like about what I'm hearing a little bit more of a commitment than let's just get it on the wall or get it on the stationery. I'm hearing a little bit about I may be adding to this, we as a board want something that will help guide us, I'm going to put some words in your mouth, will hold us accountable, as well as our administration, as well as our teachers, as well as our community, to get kids where we want them to be. Okay? What else did you hear?
Maybe you already said this, but some long-lasting component to it. I think I was certainly thinking 3 to 5 years, and then to Tyler's point, like, is there another level of thinking that is I frankly hadn't thought about, and what does that mean? Could we plan that far out? Should we be planning that far out? I'm not challenging that at all. I just hadn't thought about that, so I think that's a big piece of it. Long-lastingness, as to how long-lasting is really fascinating to me.
Because I heard the 3 to 5 quite a bit, which is really probably right on. The long-range piece, I'll call it that, just because it's longer than the 3 to 5, is exactly where you want to go over time. And I think you said it when you were talking, Tyler. I don't know if we're ready there yet, but the important piece is you keep that carrot out in front of you, so that whatever you maybe build now, then I don't know if the next year or whatever the next conversation is, okay, where does this take us? What are the possibilities? I'm a big guy in talking about possibilities. I love whiteboards. Let's just start fresh. This is what we do. This is what we do well each and every day. Now, what could it be? And then you as a board or elected body begin to work with your administration to govern that piece in. So I'm hearing 3 to 5 years, some things that we can have that are going to stand test of time, and with the hope of building that further, whatever that might mean down the road, because you got to start somewhere. And to think that, and then Tyler didn't say this, to start at 20, probably a little hard for your community and for you and your administration. 3 to 5, get a good foothold. Now it's working. We really like it. Whomever's sitting at this table, whether it's the administrator or the board, well, we have clear direction. This is what we do. Now we start stretching it a little bit more. What does it look like? What does demographics tell us? What does research tell us? What do we need to do that makes me, and I heard over and over again, kind of uniquely Gilbert. Now, not everyone said that, but there seems to be a sense of pride in the fact that you want this to go beyond what Ames might say, or Roland Story might say, or Colfax Mingo or IMAT might say.
Yeah.
You really want to focus this in, and what I think I'm hearing is one of the ways you think you can do this is by getting everybody moving in the right direction. So this is kind of like the old Venn diagram, without drawing one. The board represents something, the administration represents superintendents, students, teachers, community members, all these groups you said, and where they come together, all those circles, as you know, that's where the real power is. And so for me, and I hate to use the word target, but that's the piece we want to get to. How do we bring all of those stakeholders and entities into a conversation that gets us right there, that becomes the nucleus, for lack of a better term, of what you as a board believe the community needs to be doing over the course of time for children. I also heard, I'm kind of running down the road here a little bit, and John, I want you to jump in there, and Lindsay as well. I also heard a number of times about students. It was about, I didn't hear facilities, I didn't hear communication, because oftentimes when I do this, at least my experience, when I go into a group and I say, help, the board has asked you to help us come up with priorities. But depending upon where I sit coming into that meeting, well, the board never talks to me, or the school district never talks to me, so one of my priorities is communities. My kid doesn't like the lunch, so one of my priorities is the nutrition program. The bus was late. Transportation. So we get these really outliers of really where it is that we want to go. But what I think I heard, and you correct me, is that a lot of this focus is going to be on about students, about what that looks like 3 to 5 years for your kids. Is that, and I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, I'm just trying to facilitate. Is that a fair assessment, do you think?
Yeah, I think maybe it was Deb said it best, but student success, right? So what does that mean? How do our graduates do in the world after they leave here? And that's not how do they do in college, that's how do they do.
Right. you know.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
That's important.
Right,
That's
right.
an important
Yeah,
distinction.
life
Yes.
readiness.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Yeah, it's great to say you had them all go to Iowa State or wherever, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But how well are they doing in the real world, so to speak?
Yeah, how many wanted to do vocational and had that, and they were built, they were guided that way, enabled in our district to do that. One quick comment just on the long range, not to scare anybody. I'm not suggesting that we have a plan for 25 years from now, but it's hard for me to even do a 3 to 5 without going, what are the major trends that we say this is probably going to hold true? Gilbert's going to grow. Online education's going to grow. Funding from the state's going to continue to shrink. I mean, just some simple blocks that say that's probably the long-term trend that as we now back up and say 3 to 5 years, it helps us put that back into a framework.
And I'm
Please.
probably like, to me, it's harder to do 3 to 5. I can't understand like the 3 to 5. I can't get my arms around that. To me, it's all about what you really think and the direction of where it's going long term. So, you know what I mean? To me, like to split it apart. That's what that. Just so I'm clear about the comments I made about 3 to 5. It's difficult for me to know and sit here and say, well, I think this is going to be true for 3 to 5 years, but then it's going to change. I just think, where do we think? I look farther, you know, than that. It's hard for me.
Yeah, but at some point you gotta, what I heard the
You can
first
look
few
back.
years that I was
think
on the
we
board
backwards.
was, hey, don't keep changing. I heard that a lot, was like, especially when we started bringing up
Yeah.
project-based learning, right?
Yeah.
Oh, is this just the word of the day or whatever? I don't remember exactly the term, but Lindsay remembers and nodding his head. So you do have to stick your stake in the ground, and that's our responsibility.
Yep.
So it is hard, but we certainly can't just, in my opinion, we can't just do 1 year, because then it's just, okay, we made it this far, we make it to the next one,
I'm
right?
thinking
Well,
10.
to give-
I think it's hard
Sure.
to not. I'm thinking it's hard to do 3 to
To
5.
give
I
an
think it's
example,
harder to go
the
farther.
Osage schools presented computer science is now K through 12 in Osage.
Mhm.
And what are they saying? Is to have that flexibility that our students are going to need
Yeah.
to know. Their careers are going to just change lightning fast. And what are they going to need to know is if they have a good handle of computers, they're going to succeed better than if they don't. And so that would be a 20-year trend that we're saying, hey, we just need to do.
Yeah.
put a stake.
Technology needs to
I
be
get it.
embedded.
Yeah, because it's just going to be, you know, the deal. Now, I don't know that that's the case, but I was like, wow, that's a big change.
Well, and that's every
Sorry.
time, I'm sorry, every time that I've brought up Sioux City, the thing that I like most about the work that they've done is it is that long-reaching verbiage, if anything, you know, providing relevant, rigorous, and innovative academics. That goes from here until we close the buildings, right? Because it's all relevant to what's happening now. And to your point, John, it can happen fast. We can keep moving. I think that we as a group, it would be great if we could create something that supports our students, you know, providing safe and healthy, supportive learning environments that, again, stands the test of time. And not just the 5 of us deciding this is what we believe, this is what we want to do, but getting that input from all of our stakeholders and our students and our parents and our teachers, and having them say, this is what we, Gilbert, believe to be true and what our priorities are.
Do you think, Kim, that sort of a statement, that it was the 3 R's that were sounding really amazing, I don't remember what they were. Is that, I have 2 questions. My first one, is that specific enough to guide us and the administrative team to evaluate decisions that we have in front of us? Right, that's the one question I have about that. I mean, that's like every student every day, which is a lovely thing, and I totally stand behind. Mm-hmm. But that isn't necessarily helping us evaluate decisions that we have to make, right?
Right.
And so, like, what is that, a little more specificity that would provide that, like, guidance around, like, you know, whether it's building facilities work or it's curriculum choices, you know, or whatever the kind of things that we get to take action on.
Right.
So that's my first question real quick. And then my second question is, are you looking for us to help define the direction of what your output looks like, or what we anticipate is, like, the criteria for the output,
Like the
right?
I think-
Yeah, this
I'm
was the
sorry.
product.
Or like
We're
the
talking about the
deliverable.
product.
The product, what it would be.
What are the
If I go
products?
back to your first question, which I think is
Yeah.
a really excellent question, because what's really neat here now is the conversations you all are having. Because John and I should basically be able to leave and you guys get down to it. I think what I would throw in based upon what I heard is, could you read that statement again, the first one?
To provide relevant, rigorous, and innovative academics.
That are unique to Gilbert. A number of you talked about the uniqueness, and the difference in it becomes, what does it look like here? It could be a statement that someone else has or clear, and it isn't as specific until you add what you gave me. And what you gave me is, we want it unique. We want it about our kids and our future and our location and our population and our stakeholders. And that's where the work gets real. That's where you have every conversation about, is this unique, if we're building this with putting in all of those support pieces, is this unique to us? Is this about us? And those are the questions I throw back constantly. Is this unique to us? Not to get anybody. This shouldn't be a gotcha for anybody.
Right.
This should be what I'm hearing, if I can take you for sincerity that I'm hearing it in, this is about your students. So what's unique in these proposals and plans and statements to us?
If you think about what I typically see and look at a lot of call them playbooks or district guiding documents, what you'll typically see is things that don't change. Those are beliefs or values. You know, we want to take advantage of what our community, our unique community assets are, the types of things that you see in a portrait of a learner, and then based on beliefs and values and what you think your community believes about its school system, then you get the guiding principles, which are board priorities. So those, I think, board priorities typically are 3 to 5 years, because it takes about that long to develop and implement and measure and innovation. And then within those priorities, then you get down to actionable strategies or goals that are done typically jointly with the administration and the board, or the administration will, for 3 to 5 years, bring to the board actionable plans to support the priorities. So I think, you know, when I hear Tyler talking about, you know, wanting to make sure we capture what's unique about Gilbert, that's a community value. You've got unique community assets, you've got unique community values. You're never going to be further from Iowa State. You're always going to have a kind of a growing community, I think, with a lot of intellectual capital based on your location. And it may be that one of your values is that you really want to make sure that you take advantage of your need. You know, once you get your input and decide what you really believe and what you want your guiding principles or values to be that don't change, then you can every 3 to 5 years kind of renew your priorities. Based on, and anytime you want to develop new priorities, do they reflect our values? So when you talk about, when you look at the portrait of a learner or portrait of a graduate, really that reflects what we believe about kids. And for a life well lived, we're going to need to do these things so that the portrait, and then I heard it earlier, you know, how our kids are going to do in life, not just in college or wherever, you know. So we settle on some beliefs or guiding principles that aren't changing. I mean, typically communities don't change their values or beliefs very much. So, you know, that's the 20-year thing, in my opinion. Those, you can review those periodically, but when you really want to dig into what the core values of the community are, those are the things that you have to remember and get true to that. Then, as a board, what do we think needs to be our priority for the next 3 to 5 years? And then as an administrative team, what do we believe should be annual targets that help support those priorities so that we know that we're on track? So that alignment piece kind of comes into play. But I think Jim's absolutely right. Where it all starts is having some consensus around first of all, the board, if that's what the board wants to do, the board, I think, needs to agree how to bring the community together, and then what's the product? Is the product, do we want to dig into this portrait of a graduate and really look at what are our beliefs about Gilbert, what's going to be unique about the Gilbert community and school system? Because those really aren't priorities in my mind. Priorities are are, I always think of, you know, management by objective, or when you look at it like strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, where you look at the landscape and say, okay, we know in the next 3 to 5 years, these are the things we're dealing with. Those things then do need to be reviewed annually, and then it really becomes the task, I think, of administration typically to develop the initiatives and the strategies and the innovations that are going to build towards the priorities that get set. So, you know, when you talk about what's 20 years, what's 5, what's 1, and who does those things, see, I think, in my mind, the core values, guiding principles, some people call them North Stars. I mean, you see a lot of things, or they'll call them just the different characteristics in that portrait of a graduate. Those are guiding beliefs about what kids should experience, and what we agree we want our kids to do to have a life well lived when they leave, you know, when they leave here. So those are guiding things that don't change, in my opinion, very much. Now, what does change, though, is the landscape. So how do you then settle in on priorities? You've got really good priorities here. I mean, and they seem to be very current. I'm not sure, though. It sounds to me anyway, like maybe there hasn't been a real strong consensus or community about reviewing these. And when we do review our priorities, I'm looking at this.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
I've got some copies. I'll send them around.
Yeah. When we do review these, are we reviewing them in light of our belief system about Gilbert? And so that's, to my mind, and I'm kind of learning about Portrait of a Graduate right now too, and to my mind, that becomes a guiding vision of what the community believes about its kids and the school system. So, and I'm not on the board, so I've just weighed in a little too much probably, but
I think the clarity.
I think if you can align your long-term things don't change. Community beliefs and values don't change. They're fairly permanent, but we need help capturing what those are, what's unique about our community, and then I think it's the board's responsibility to get those formalized somehow based on community input. And then also, I believe, and I don't know, you tell me, Jim, and if you agree with this, but then also the board, I think, establishes priorities for the district. And that's kind of what you've done, basically. But it can be done, they can be reviewed annually, it can be done every 3 to 5 years. I just want to make sure we kind of have some alignment of what we're talking about in terms of principles, values versus priorities versus goals or objectives. And as you get down to shorter term, you're getting more into more management by initiative as opposed to what we believe about the school system. So
I think that was great. I think that was good. I think it helped clarify a lot of pieces, so thank you.
I think it did definitely for me, so thank you.
Yeah. So at the risk of saying, well, we're going back and plowing old ground, I think that is very helpful, John. Kim and Lindsay, as the old folks here, correct me if you see it different, but I think we established this approach a number of years ago, but what you just described as the values, I would say we're making some assumptions. Mm-hmm. So in other words, with the couple of new board members now come back and said, have we really garnered the community input on what you've just described as the North Star beliefs and values, the portrait of a graduate effort, which, okay, as you've kind of described that, then I'm thinking, well, maybe one of the purposes is to confirm our assumptions or to just open it back up to say, are these truly our values and principles that we're driving from? Because when you get down to the actual goals, that's where I guess I've struggled, maybe just me, but well, that's our job. You tell us what you think this school district, what's our community values about, and let's agree on what our long-term vision is. Well, then that's the work of the board and the administration to get down to the nitty-gritties, right? So I'm almost, after your conversation, I'm saying, well, the thing that's missing that we haven't done really, correct me if I'm wrong, Kim and Lindsay, as you see it, but we haven't really gone to the community and gathered in, okay, we've been making these assumptions that this is, and this everybody will go, oh yeah, the Gilbert way. but that might be one of the biggest values we can do right here.
Exactly, and that's where I took off, and then we kind of started pulling it back. We've sent out an invitation to approximately 60 people, and after our conversation the other day, I think absolutely we need to look at some business owners, some business folks outside of our community, you know, in the Ames area as well, and city council, and just some people. But we really tried to go out and invite some folks who we don't hear from all the time, because we have some groups that we hear from frequently, and not that we would push them away, but really by invitation trying to pull in those voices we haven't heard, waiting on conversation from the board to know that we're on the right path, because I agree with you 100%. The five of us represent our district because they've elected us and they talk to us each individually, and we'd like to think that we make all of our decisions on their behalf. But very rarely do we go ask a large group of them. And so in pulling them together, really, let's find those vision points. Let's find what the community believes is important, and then start going from there. The one thing I would, and then I think we as a board, our responsibility is those priorities, those second level that John was talking to. And then I really feel that then we should hand it off to the administrators, and their goals, they have to evaluate the goals that they set for their own buildings based on the priorities that we've set for them. You know, it's like we answer to the public, and then the administrators have to answer to us. Everything should have
Alignment.
And they should say, this is what I want to do in my building. Does it fit the priorities the board has set for me? Right?
I agree.
There's one thing that I would push down a little bit deeper, though, at least on the initial go-around, is when we establish the core values, which I think are not as challenging as the 5-year priorities. But I would like to have input from stakeholders as to what do you see as a priority that you think you would like to have accomplished in the next 5 years. So it goes back to that listening leadership. It's not that we're necessarily going to do it, but I really want to hear from different stakeholders of what does success look like in the next 5 years if you were a board member, or if you were a superintendent, if you were a teacher, if you were a student, if you were a parent. Yep. And then I think we will get some focus on the rocks. I think we know the rocks high up, but you know, when we start talking uniquely Gilbert, you know, even some of it is not so uniquely Gilbert as to, you know, there are some awfully smart people in our district that I want to harness of, what do you think things look like in 5 years? And so for my particular, it's all about finance. And you know, the thing I would change is it's horrible that we saddle kids with 6-figure debt without giving them the tools at college, that they take on that debt without having any idea how it's going to be repaid and how that's going to impact their life for the next 50 years. It's unconscionable. And so from a finance position, that's the clarity I would bring. Now, I want to have that from all of that skill set to say, okay, now how do we say that impacts our 3 to 5 year goals? So I would just, you know, somehow to harness that a little bit deeper, and maybe you're thinking we can get that in the beliefs, but I know that there's skill sets that people bring that I cannot get as a school board member, just as a function of, I use that example as one that's just so blatantly obvious to me, but I have no idea how I can make that change as just being one person.
I think one thing that makes communities unique, and it's often reflected in school leadership and board activity, and I've seen a wide variety of this, and that is, how often do we believe we need to go to our stakeholders for input and for what purposes? Yeah. Some communities don't do it very often at all. Some do it a lot and do it annually. Yeah. You know, so there's a wide range of, and you have public meetings, and you know, your school board meetings are all open and people can see what you're doing. Yeah, I don't disagree, and I have a question too. Have you looked at the definition of college and career ready? Have you been looking at those 4
They haven't.
things? Okay, because that's one of the ways that.
Because I think we welcome the feedback, but I just don't think, you know, we have the level of engagement that we would like as a board.
And how often do you want to have that engagement, and to what end? I think that's kind of what Jim is trying to help get a consensus around.
I think what's important, I agree with everything you're saying, and I think the thing that comes to mind when you're saying that, John, is like, how do we get the stakeholders feeling like they can make a difference that is scoped in the way that we want, right? Because what we're not saying is, hey, tell us where to go. Right? That you're making the choice, or that we're going to form some like average consensus here. But what we're saying is, what are the unique things that you value, and then how do we let them have some level of like feeling like they're making an impact without it being like a democratic decision in that moment in those rooms, you know? And I think we found people who are passionate and don't have that opportunity kind of bubble up in these ways. We're like, oh dear, how do we take that feedback now? Or we find that we get a bunch of people together and we get no result out of it because we're like, well, we haven't really given them any compelling ownership in this space. And so the trick in this, to me, seems clarifying what the ask is and what the output is and letting them come. And I think, Kim, you've done a good job in this in your initial invite to that initial stakeholder group, you know, specifying those things. I don't know if you've all seen that letter that Kim...
No, and I was just thinking, I'll put that, I'll share it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let me ask a question. Do you think that the purpose of this activity should be twofold? One is to get that kind of that guiding, value-driven piece that you're talking about, like with the portrait of the graduate, but also then drill down to another level of making sure that we've got stakeholder input on priorities that are going to be driving more annual or shorter term types of priorities.
And I don't think annual, but I think, you know, 5 years.
Yeah, so I think it's important to clarify. I think we definitely want the first, and I think we'd be fair in saying that's going to be a deliverable, an outcome that's going to be finished with this, right? The values, the portrait, the North Star. I think we could say that's a deliverable. I agree with seeking input on the 3 to 5, and as a board member, I'd like to hear that, but I think that we need to be, my opinion, set a very careful expectation that we're gathering that information for the board now to take into consideration for 3 to 5 years priorities.
I agree.
And it's not a democracy, that's what we've been elected to do, but before we make those decisions, we want to be good listeners.
I think if we do good work on that high level piece, that our board priorities will be in line with what our public or what our patrons feel. I think we should bounce it off of them, but I agree with you.
But I think it's good. I think it's good to clarify those. And John, I think you did a nice job. But I think be really clear on that, right? And then I think we're all in agreement that when you get down to the annuals, well, that's the administration working with us. So that, I mean, our role there is accountability.
Right.
And quite honestly, I felt like in the last couple of years, maybe we haven't figured exactly what that looks like to be totally transparent and get us out of the kitchen, and yet, well, we're the ones that are testing the food, you know. So.
Right. Well, and you know, I was going to share that through the invitations, we've asked, like I said, current students, but I think it's important to bring in those recently graduated or those kids that are in that next phase. What have we done? Not, you know.
Yeah, because they will give you some insight, you know, once they're out of the school, that's a little easier for them to talk about than when you're in school, I would think. And they'll have a little more maturity to gauge. They'll forget about the lunch lines too long, and they will think up at a higher level as well when they're a year removed.
We're doing some focus groups right now in another district, and we're just asking 4 questions to multiple stakeholder groups and kind of doing a qualitative collection that we're then just going to give back to the board. So I know that there are a couple ways that we can do this. We can go ahead and try to facilitate a process, which I know Jim has done and so have I, where we bring multiple diverse stakeholders together and develop some consensus around some priorities and say, here's what your community thinks. Or we can facilitate a conversation where we give you a bunch of information from stakeholder groups and let you wrestle with it yourself. I don't know, Jim, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. Again, whatever you want to do with that. A lot of that is what we'll take that and then we'll have our folks kind of analyze and get down to the themes that we were able to find in the data that we've got. And that'll be part of what we give back to you that you would take the next steps with. But we can do whatever the board prefers. But for you to take all of that, because there'll be a lot. And it'll be important in the facilitation to ask the right questions.
We can do a qualitative matrix, give you some themes.
Yeah, and as a part of that, one of the things is these guys are sick of hearing it about this whole engagement. How do you measure engagement with those groups,
Right.
Do you feel like you have a voice at school, whether you're a teacher or a parent or, whatever, or, that kind of, gosh, this is what engagement looks like, and so how do we leverage that we continue to get people, more engaged in the education process? And I don't know exactly what that looks like, but that would be one of the things that.
And of course, you could survey that across your district with questions to see how engaged people are.
Yeah, do a lot of your districts.
Because the people that are there probably go, well, I'm here tonight, so I'm okay with that.
Right.
I think you're talking on a broader base.
Yeah.
Of
You have a lot of your schools using that Gallup to kind of.
Yes, some do. It all depends. It all depends on what it is, but it's the fastest way to get it and the technology available to people. And then you hope you get a high end, which I think here you probably would, I'm guessing, just with your community.
Well, I just like that stake in the ground, and that becomes something that we can measure how we're getting, because if we have engaged people, that means we're doing the right thing.
Right.
And there are various engagement surveys out there.
Right.
I would suggest you use one of them, not develop your own. But,
Yeah.
Because, there's plenty of them. And then there's also the condition of ed reports that will be part of the new accountability system under ESSA. So you will have some survey information that looks a little bit like the old Iowa Youth Survey. That's going to be part of your district report card at some time. So you'll have some trackable year to year, and engagement is a big part of that. I have a person I can talk to at school, or that type of stuff.
Yeah.
My teachers care about me. Or with teachers, I have a voice in the school district. So that would be easy.
That's coming along, and I just think that'll be a good measure for us when we say, how are we doing on executing that? When you start seeing those building in the right direction, I think that'll be the mark of success.
Yeah, when you mentioned, which way what do you want? I think you asked that, sorry, but what is that? I was thinking of maybe option one, where it's more engaged and it's kind of synthesized for the community input on the values, and then maybe more of a capturing exercise on the priorities. Did you ask that, or you kind of posed it? I don't know if that's something you were asking us to kind of make a decision on, but. Right.
I'm kind of seeing two things that I think I heard in the conversation that you were having with John. Is one, work around the guiding values and portrait of the learner. I call it learner, I'm sorry, portrait of a graduate. And then the priorities then to drive that, okay? So can I make an assumption then of the fact if we're looking around those guiding values piece around the portrait, which would be student-centered, that's kind of what I heard you talk about. And then basically, what are the priorities underneath that we would have to do using the way John laid it out for you? And coming back with that data to the board, is that fair to start going in that direction of what that might look like? And then the other piece will be the quality of questions we use to facilitate that conversation to get to those means. And so I'll have to think about that just a little bit. I don't know that I have an offer of what that would look like, but it could be 3 to 4 questions that basically we act all in attendance to respond in small groups, et cetera, and come up with some priorities that I think on our side of the house, we have individuals who probably can look at all of that data and pull together some really pretty good themes about what we believe was said. If we do that, I just ask that the board would be patient in knowing that takes some time from the initial conversations we have until you get that, because our folks are doing a lot of other kinds of things. So that would be all that I would ask. I'm not saying it'd be 6 months, but I think we need 6 weeks maybe to get it.
Can we talk about that before
Sure.
you have to leave? And I know that
That's okay.
Because time to me is something I think we maybe still need some alignment on. And this will sound maybe a little bit immature on my standpoint, it probably is, but I really miss not having our current school year's goals up there. And I would say take all the time you want, if we just had that, and it may sound like a checklist, but I shared with Lindsay, and I don't know who else was still around, maybe John at the end of the school board convention Thursday, but as an example, and this is recorded and that's fine, but one of the sessions I sat in on last Thursday was on project-based learning, and it ended up being from Ames, and it ended up being 3 teachers that basically shared their extreme frustration with what happened, and that was administration and the school board, with them feeling like the rug got pulled out from underneath of them. And I kept listening to, well, how did that happen? Well, how did it happen? And I shared this with Lindsay. It never got codified in anything that suggested that this is what we stand for.
Right.
Okay? And right, wrong, or otherwise, I felt really good that, well, we've been pretty clear on that. And I miss not having that up there when we're having our meetings right now. Why did I just say all that? If you say it's going to take 6 months, that's fine, but what are we doing in the meantime? I don't want us to be going, well, this year's kind of just a transition year. We talked about some goals a couple months ago that I thought we were ready with. So I'm ready to say take all the time you need with the assumption that we know what we're doing this year.
Do you want some community input on your most recent set of priorities? And then build up those?
Here's what I suggested a couple of months ago, and I'd like to see if we can get there, is say, you know what, this is for next year's.
Right.
This exercise you're doing, whatever, if we change from 21st century learning and strategic resourcing and culture of continuous learning, great. But we're not going to, are we going to wait until we do this exercise to have the 2018, 2019 goals?
No, and actually Lindsay and Carrie and I visited a little bit about this coming back from, we talked about it after the last board meeting, but again after last week. We wanted to go through this exercise, make sure that we're all on the same page, but my thought and Lindsay's thought was that these 3 goals would stand, and we need to get the work that we're doing this year, the goals that we all agreed to, slid in there and get them posted. Yep.
I agree. I think that's what Tyler's asking. That's a good, yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's a good point that he brings up, because, you know, when he was talking about that the other day after IASB's convention, we always have had these. These have been our goals, and we've always had those up. What I would propose is, or I don't know if I would propose it, but I would say that we would take these that we've talked about with the group. I don't know if you have them, or I can get you copies of them, and that those would be what we would go ahead and put.
Those belief statements that we put forward.
Do we have those?
That outline portrait of a graduate and IPI and, yeah.
Do we have those electronically? Are those in any of
I
our
thought that we had them.
board packets?
Yes.
Okay, cool.
When
I don't
will-
need any more hard copies.
Do you know the date?
Yeah.
It was like
I don't need any more
August,
printouts.
July.
But are you good with saying go that direction right now?
I mean, I think so. I mean, we are reading in front of it. Oh, no, we don't have the 18-19 ones
No,
here.
we
Sorry.
don't.
Are we talking about keeping the red similar and then changing the bullets underneath it? Is that what we're talking
Yeah.
about?
I mean, I agree, Tyler.
I thought that's
with
what we
you,
said
like-
a couple.
Jim, I think
last
we
board
need to take the time to
Yeah.
listen. And
It's
some of the
in
frustration we're
July
having around the
9th.
board table is this is like year 2 or 3 of
July 9th
pushing these
drop
off. And
Okay.
so that's sending up the antennas with some of them.
Fair
But
enough.
I have
July
no debate,
July.
doubt that we will accomplish it now because I think we have the collective buy-in that this is the way we're going. We weren't aligned before, and so we just couldn't get it done, and so.
Long-range board goals.
Exactly, and so a lot of times, you know, we're getting these, you know, a couple of weeks before we go, and it's like, well, school's starting, okay, well, let's get them in there, and so we want to change that dynamic. But if we do the listening and do a good job, I think that's critical.
Did you guys,
Oh, I'm sorry.
did you guys hear what Gail said as far as they're in your Dropbox? It's the July 9th one that has those long-range board goals.
Thank you.
So when will those be consolidated and put into something that we can use for next year?
Carrie's got it
or
ready to
review?
roll. She and I worked on putting it all in there.
Okay.
And so,
You want to get this assimilated into this form?
Correct.
For this year. to
Right.
this
Outside of what
year.
you guys.
Yeah,
that's
see,
just-
Well, it is and it isn't,
That can be
okay?
done.
So let me get my antenna up even higher.
Okay.
I love this exercise, but I also, it's a little bit with the community, I think we want to say, we're not starting from scratch here.
right.
And we haven't been asleep at the wheel. We've been doing a lot of work, and I think it'd be nice to have this year's as another, you don't have to go back to 2015, but I'd say in your sessions, I'd like to say exactly what we've just said. The board is now wanting to make sure we want to listen and we want to align with what you think our values are, and this is where we've been. Now we're wanting to take the step of including you in this process.
Make sure we're on the right
But
track.
this is where we've been, right? And
Yeah.
so sorry, but
So maybe
2018-19 needs to be in there
Right.
because
Yeah.
that's where we're
And this is the
at.
work we've done. We're looking to
Yep.
confirm, to validate
Yeah.
whatever.
That's really
with the
important to
work.
honor the work that's been done, because I don't hear anybody saying like the whiteboard behind me, let's just erase everything
Right.
and start over, because some really good work is here.
Well,
So
yeah.
the point is well taken, that the community needs to know that we've done some things. What you're doing is you're just raising the bar, you're raising the level, you're looking for
Well, we're just-
something more, and
we're
that's
missing the piece.
commendable.
Yeah,
I wonder
yeah.
if-
And it did lay the groundwork for raising the bar.
Right.
I'm wondering if we couldn't come up with maybe 8 or 10 questions that we could then run back through Lindsay and have you zero in on maybe 5 or 6 that would get at some of the unique, questions, and then go with the focus group route and do some thematic, give you some feedback based on what comes in. What do you see currently as the strengths of the district? There are a lot of, we've got a pool of questions that you could ask. And as opposed to what I've been thinking about, because my previous experience typically in these situations has been bring together a large group of stakeholders and then go through consensus building activities until when you leave at the end of the process, there's kind of a consensus, which is kind of like negotiating a contract. Everybody leaves getting a little bit of what they want. So as opposed to doing it that way, maybe we do just come in with, we can bring some assessment consultants in, Jim, myself, do some focus groups, get the questions kind of set up ahead of time that you think are the questions that we need, get that data collected, give it back to you with some thematic analysis, and then we can always come back at a board work session or even bring back a group of community and show it to them, and then dive into longer range priorities going forward. Because I guess I've been thinking that we're going to do a consensus building activity, and maybe what we're really trying to do is just, I keep hearing listening leadership and community input.
I think consensus building is not the right direction.
Yeah.
I'll say this is one of 5 of us, but I think people who are truly visionary are very few, and the rest of us need to be led to be thinking that way.
So what you might find through this process would be some bright spots, some really things that would just really catch you like, wow.
Great idea.
That's really a good
That's what
observation.
yeah.
And, so then I guess the next question is, you've got a lot of people invited, who are you thinkers, who do you want here, what?
Make sure they're in the room.
Yeah, and can we do virtual? Would there be a possibility to have virtual for the people that won't turn out, and that we could?
And I would just say someone who works remotely.
You could set up a Google thing, and
Yeah.
I mean, we did that with listening
I'll
posts
leave
before.
that.
I'm sorry, Brian.
Yeah, I'm just thinking outside the box of,
Yeah.
how do we expand the younger folks who will be like, well, I might not show up, but I might sit in my recliner at home.
My problem with that though is,
I think you want to work with the willing, right?
Hold on,
I mean,
I want to be careful here. I just need to say this. I work remotely every day. I worked remotely since 2008. There are things that work really well remotely. Real-time, high-value vision setting, strategizing stuff is not a thing that works well remotely.
Okay.
Especially a hybrid blend of like 2 people calling in and the rest of us around here.
right.
Yeah.
What could work remotely is like step back, think about it in some sort of long response, email, Google form, whatever. But I think having a high collaboration, high value interactive
Make them
meeting,
it'd be a separate deal.
It'd be incredible.
To get the electronic
Incredibly hard,
feedback
But
versus.
we do though, like with the district that we're working with right now with the focus groups, they are going to put the same open-ended questions that are going to be asked at the focus group online for someone who can't be there, that has something they want to share.
Yeah, that would-
Different.
that
I think
would-
that's what, I think
yes.
that's
Especially if
different.
it's a standardized
We'll
question.
just
Yeah.
pull
Right.
that into what we've gathered that evening.
Okay.
And I think it's and you all are doing this. It'd be great to have those those questions in the people's hands prior to the meeting, because some people
Yes.
think great on the moment.
Right.
I don't do any thinking unless I'm talking. I'm just honest here about this. Some people need days to do
Sure.
that prior.
I agree.
One other thing that I think would be neat, but I'm asking fellow board members is, so I don't know how many focus groups we'll have, but let's say there's 6 or 8. I think when we got together for a work session, it'd be nice to, in the first go-round, to actually have some of those folks then in our work session. And in other words, we talk about engagement. Well, we'll sit here in a board meeting and it'll be the same folks, right?
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
So as you go through those focus and you understand who's really contributing, it'd be nice to say, hey, on February 15th or whenever it's going to be, we're going to have a, back to the board with some of this information, and it'd be great if you would participate.
You have a gift for, or we think you have some valuable input that we would like.
Right. To proactively bring them in to what I would see as the next phases. I like capturing what you talked about capturing, but then distill down so that we can then get to some 3 to 5 year priorities at some point.
So hearing you talk, I think I've been thinking about this slightly different than what you just said, which is that we sort of like authorize a committee to come back and propose something to us, and we as a board kind of like take their proposal and maybe shape it a bit or move it around a bit, and then kind of go like, yep, this is great work, versus us doing that work. Which way do you see that?
What I think what I've communicated, I don't know that we have alignment on it.
No, I know
is that we do have clarity of the priorities, the North Star from these focus groups. Yep. So you go across and you'll hear the elements. We probably covered many of them, but maybe not all of them tonight already. That'll be done coming out of focus groups for us to go, yep, that sounds like the Gilbert way.
Yeah.
Right? They will also have gathered some ideas for what the 3 to 5 year, but no commitment to those groups at all that these will be what's on a sign now.
Right.
But that's feedback to us to then have a good work session with, I think, the administration on, okay, what does that mean? Because we got to get this down to a reasonable number, to 3 of them. So one part is done, one part's just gathering information is what I would see.
I think it's a matter of semantics, but if we, and you used it, but if we want a proposal, like here's our written proposal, that's going to take a lot more work with that group, only because how do you get 60 people to write a proposal? And I'm not sure you intended that. So how do we get that data all put together that is manageable for you? And again, I'm not challenging what you said.
No, I'm just kidding. I appreciate it.
I thought, wow, if we're going to go to proposal, I don't know that I could get 5 of you to write a proposal tonight, so to speak.
What was in my head was that we had those big groups and we gathered all of this great information, and from that we know that there are many, many people who can't commit to committee work. Just like with the building project, you had very few that could pull into that committee, and that smaller group then would do the work and then come forward to the board with a proposal. And like you said, give us the information that we need to then solidify our priorities and to move forward going down the road with goals.
Do you think that small group would have a proposal saying we think these are the 3 to 5 year priorities?
No,
or do you think they would just have a proposal that said here's what we heard, there's 10 things?
I think that they would start the work on the priorities.
They would
that they would have
work.
maybe
Here's
5, 6
kind of
things
Here's what we're
that,
identified with.
right, that then the board could further
What could add
refine.
to, they could delete.
So it's
Right.
not too different.
Right.
I think what will help, because I think John did an excellent job of laying that out, is we could also put the roles of everyone. So what's the role of the board? We'll start with you. What's the role of the board in this process? What's the role of the administration or superintendent, however you want to do that? Then all the way to what's the role of the committee.
Right.
So you should be able to see what's coming to you and what you're giving out.
Yeah.
So now you're passing down, if you will, the opportunity, rather than do it yourself on the priorities, you're passing it all the way to the committee. The committee's responsibility then is kind of to come back the other way.
I'm struck. I want to be careful here. I as a board member am not willing to delegate out the writing of the 3 to 5 year priorities to somebody else.
Right.
I think that's our job.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I don't want to have a committee think that, well, we gave you, you didn't listen to us. So I'm not sure exactly what the process is.
I
think that's why Jim is saying, I think, let people know right up front, here's how this process is going to work. We're going to collect a lot of input from a lot of different people so that the board can take a broad cross-section of
Yes.
of feedback and develop
Yeah.
our next set. And I would suggest too, just to validate the good work that's been done already, I would suggest that prior to the focus groups or as part of preparing for that people see what's been done.
Yeah.
You get
Right.
With
You
the
get that
fourth
in there.
one there.
Yep.
Yeah, kind of show them the momentum of
Just say, here's
where we're
here's
going.
where the district has been recently, here's where we're
Yeah.
going in the short term.
Yeah.
We feel though that it's time as a board to get a broad cross-section of feedback from various stakeholders so that we can be informed in terms of how to do this next.
I'm with Tyler, I think, on that. Like, I like that approach, but I think ultimately it comes, as long as we are abundantly
you.
clear.
Thank you.
Right.
That we
Sorry
say to
to
these
interrupt you.
guys. Thank you.
Yes, I'll be there
Okay.
tomorrow morning.
All right.
So I'm going to go to
Thanks,
Colfax's community now and do the same kind of stuff.
Nice.
So everybody, it's good, but you're ahead of
Just
the
whatever they're doing in Colfax.
Oh, no, I'm going to make sure you take good notes. Thank you. You really honestly.
Uniquely Gilbert.
Yeah. That's right.
I think the
Thank
disconnect
you very
for me
much,
is
Jim.
in saying community priorities. I don't mean it like our 3 to 5 year priorities. I mean
Community
the
beliefs.
okay,
The beliefs.
community beliefs. If we bring together, if we bring back to the board and the administrative team 5, 6, 7 community beliefs.
Yeah, we're in
Big
violent
belief
agreement on
statements,
that.
then we take those things and we create our priorities.
And that can inform your portrait.
Yes.
And we have to be abundantly
Yes.
clear.
And see, that's the one
They don't
piece I
think
think
they're-
is really important that we agree upon. We don't want to ask these focus groups to come back again and again and again and again. So Carrie, I'm hoping Carrie it's okay for Carrie to participate because a lot of this work goes hand in hand with the work that she's doing and validating the portrait of graduate work. That, I mean, she hasn't been out to the parent groups yet. She's been with the staff and with the students and with the support staff, but she has, and the board, but not with the parent groups. And so this is an opportunity
Except Sciac, yeah.
for her to hear from them as well.
Listen, she wants to listen.
Yes,
Well,
she
as long
doesn't
as
want to
it's
facilitate, she's
listening,
listening.
But, you know, I've been hearing a lot, which I'm trying to still process, of we're prescribing too much. The danger there is if Carrie's in that room and you're trying to get some open-ended questions going from 2 facilitators, is all of a sudden it's a prescribed portrait of graduate exercise.
So we want her to be able to listen, to know that her work on Portrait of Graduate is on track, because the two really need to be.
So I challenge you, does she need to be in the room?
Could
And
she-
I have nothing against Carrie at all in this,
No.
but does she need to be in the room, or
Can we
can she
make sure?
rely on the summaries that they're providing?
That's fine.
Because I want to, if we're going out to the community, make it
Yeah.
open-ended, make it open. Don't have any sense that, well, this is the answer you're supposed to have.
It's kind of how I think you would
Sense.
think about that, Kim, or at least how I would, is I'm much more open, but if my boss is in the room, I'm going to be like following every lead that my boss comes with. And I'm going to be much more touchy about bringing something that's different than what we're doing. Where if it's just, you know,
So let's
a
Two
consultant, I mean,
facilitators
I
and
could
5
put-
other
And it's not like we have to
community
do any of it, Kim. I mean, it's like, hey, you know, that's a bad idea, but for you guys, you can just nod. You know?
and have somebody type and make sure we capture.
Yeah.
Right.
So I'm wondering then, what we have done typically is gone kind of homogeneous on the focus groups. We're going to have a staff group, we're going to have business, we're going to have parents. The other way to do that is try to bring together cross sections of people and see what pollinates. But my personal, I guess, recommendation is you probably want to know what, you know, how do your parents, business community, I mean, who's been invited already? I know you said you had conversations about adding some business people.
Yep. Yep.
More.
I guess
It's
my-
the real is who should be in the room,
Mhm.
and then what do we want to ask them?
Mhm.
And I think I've got a rough idea, but do we have enough time to maybe kick that around a little bit?
Oh,
Right
that's
now.
good. I mean, if we're going through this exercise to gather community, I guess as a board member, I'd like to know who's going to be there, and are we throwing a big enough net?
And
Right.
what do you
I think
and what do you
Yeah,
want to
that's-
learn?
Yep.
Yeah.
What do you want to learn from these?
Just a
people?
practical level, we have like 15 minutes left
Okay.
in this session, so I just want, sorry, not to interrupt you at all, just so we're all
Right.
aware.
Right.
Okay, all right. So let me just check for understanding real quick. we want to bring together some groups, some community groups, a broad cross-section of stakeholders to conduct some focus groups, to try to capture what various community stakeholder groups value in their school system. We can get at values, we can get at beliefs, we can get at strengths and weaknesses. We can, you know, I think those are always good questions to ask. And then we want to take the data that's collected from those focus groups, develop some qualitative matrix or some type of a thematic boiled down. You'll get the raw data, you know, that's not a problem. But then we'll also do some thematic, you know, we'll do some qualitative assessment, and then have some representatives from those groups maybe come back to the board at a work session then and present some of that, or do you want us to present it? Because I heard somebody say, you know, let's bring them back too and have them be part of the work session, a cross section of those people.
My only statement was it'd be nice, once you get that engagement and once you find out who's really engaged, it'd be nice to somehow keep them engaged. Now, right. I don't want to kidnap a board work session or, you know, give the community members some expectation that they're going to write these, but
if you think they would be helpful in the process, John, in your judgment, that's what I would be comfortable with. You'd be like, you know, this person really seems to have a pretty good grasp on X, Y, Z, and so I believe that that would be worthwhile when we having that person in the room when we discuss this with administrators and the board, and it can strictly be your judgment call, and I'm comfortable with that. It would just be, gosh, it's another good voice at the table that gives us good stakeholder feedback.
And typically the groups are parents, business, staff, and students. Who am I missing?
The one area that I think would be interesting would be like
graduates.
Graduates would be interesting, and also I think I understand business, but also what about representatives from, I don't know, folks who are involved at a different level of education?
Business community.
You know what I mean, like with colleges or something like that. I don't know. What is that? Does that make sense? Do you know what I'm saying? Like, not just because we're talking about, do you have these people in education here at Iowa State that I'd be interested to understand what they thought the trends were. I don't know.
Yeah, well, I think you could maybe group that into where I was going was more of community organizations. In other words, I think it'd be nice to have somebody from the Gilbert City Council represented in a stakeholder group, along with the Ames City Council. Probably half of our kids come from Ames. It'd be nice to have, if they would, somebody from even the County Board of Supervisors or somebody from the county, somebody from the chamber. I mean, and then you could also try to have a couple folks from Iowa State. I mean, it'd just be, that's sort of some of the uniquenesses that come out.
And we know some of those folks, John, so we could help you chase them down as well. And Lindsay's on the chamber board, so we would have connections to, I know some folks that I think would be good.
I'd like to keep the message consistent if we could, and I sent you all a copy of the letter that I sent out to the community members and the students. If you don't mind, I'd love the names, and I'll certainly send the letter out to all of those people. I'm not going to pick and choose, but I think that the message should be consistent that we've sent to everyone.
Oh, sure, but we might need some personal invitations to pull them in that, you know, they'll come if Brian asks them because they're pretty close to Brian or Tyler, or, you know, there's something to be said of we can get the engagement just as a function of their people we're engaged with. That would be. But
I just think that we have to have one group, but we have a list that we know everybody we've asked, right?
I thought maybe
one
group.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
I was saying maybe one group then is business, community, government, and I made a note: county, chamber, city council. You know, you don't need all those people, but if you want to have a cross section, that would. So if we had parents and then business, community, government, those would just be opinion leaders, I suppose.
Sure. They at least have a
staff, and I think students.
Students
and graduates, right?
Yeah, yes, our graduates.
And you want and here's the trick with graduates.
They're all gone.
Yeah. Well,
Well, Christmas. I mean, you're coming in Most
Right.
of them have a pretty healthy Christmas break.
Don't have New Christmas Eve plans? Welcome to the session. Of cookies and cocoa.
New Year's Eve, yeah. We'll have
Yeah, New Year's Eve,
we'll have
yeah.
cookies.
I'll lure 'em in with other things.
Sometimes they don't go-
First week of January,
I was
there's
just saying,
still.
they don't go back until
Right.
like second, third
Yeah,
week of
and
January.
there's a bunch of them at Iowa State as well.
Yeah.
The other thing,
Well, I mean,
you
yeah.
can do, people do this periodically, and I don't know how it's done, but I know that people do it, and that is with a graduate survey, that you could, that might be something that does work remotely, where you send an email to, you know, one thing I thought was really neat, I can't remember what did, I'll tell you what, it was Clarinda, they did a strategic planning thing at ISB. Every kid that leaves Clarinda High School for the last 3 or 4 years, and they're gonna do it permanently, they keep their Clarinda student email address, so that they can continue to reach out to them in perpetuity, which I thought was a great idea.
Yeah.
Your kids probably have a Gmail address, right? And I suppose they probably just slowly fade away when they graduate, or you purposely cut
I think
them
they
off.
purposely cut out.
Yeah, so, I mean, that's, if you already have, they already have the old high school email address, I just thought that was a
Yeah,
good idea.
that's
I made a
interesting.
note of it, thought it was a good idea.
I like, I mean, and I maybe underestimate, but I really like the idea of a recent graduate as its own group. And that would be, I don't know, within the last 4 or 5 years, or I don't know how far out, but I do think it's feasible.
Oh, I
The
think
window
so,
we're
too.
going into, right?
And
Because
then
they're gonna
I-
have 3 or 4 years.
Pull together a cross-section of kids that have graduated within the last few years.
Oh, I think so.
And then I think to grab that, then that needs to be further refined of, okay, these were college kids, these were
Yeah.
voc kids. These
Yeah,
these
yeah,
are kids that didn't go on after.
Well, we'll conduct a focus group with anybody you want, to ask any questions you want. I'm not sure if I
How
can
many we
round
can
people
do.
up for you.
Yeah.
That will create more work.
Well, I think that's on us to
We can
round
do
them
that,
up,
yeah.
if you'll facilitate them.
And then
That's
what about, do you want to then get into, revisit the portrait of the graduate work after you get some of this input back? Or do you?
I think Carrie's moving forward, and professional development, they're moving forward in
Yeah,
the
we've
direction,
got
because there
workshops
is
coming up, and
a,
there's a lot of people doing that work right now.
yeah, and we're not reinventing the wheel on that. They have a guidebook and
That's
a
good
plan
work.
that they're
Yeah.
following,
Yeah.
and they're in sync with Ed Leader 21. So I don't think that we suspend their work.
Right.
I think the work that you're doing will confirm that the work they're doing is the right work.
Right.
But part of it then might be, okay, here's what we're doing to set the goals, and here's where we're at with that process. You know, do you have anything to add to that then? So maybe then it's more of an informative process if we have something that's already, you know, going down the road, you know, with regard to setting our core values or.
I don't think that we share the words that have been consistent and true with these focus groups. I think that it's important that we know that
It needs to be an independent.
you know,
study.
if they all come back and their priorities and their values and their vision points are the same as the ones that we are seeing a trend with and the groups Carrie's been working with, great, we share that information. If they are not in alignment, we the
share
portrait
that
of a
too.
graduate work will have to,
It'll
you know,
adjust to community values.
it will
Yeah.
adjust, yes.
Yeah.
Yep, and
Absolutely.
Carrie's all on board with
Yeah.
that. She
Okay.
knows.
Okay.
Yeah,
We're not gonna,
So
but I don't think we
so
should
against
lead
that.
them, right? We don't
I
want to
think we
lead.
got the groups, some consensus around the groups. We're going to try to do as much as we can with graduates. We'll go with business, community, government,
Mhm.
parents, staff, students, graduates.
Mhm.
yep,
And then the process would be, we'll pull these people together into focus groups, probably homogeneously, and we will ask all the groups the same set of questions.
Okay.
And so I know we don't have a lot of time left, but I wonder if right now, just without talking, think to yourself, and we'll go around before we leave. Give you a couple of seconds to think about this, couple minutes even, how about that? What's one question you really would want asked? How would you word it? And we'll pull we've got some other focus group questions too that we'll pull together, and I'll run everything back through Lindsay, and you can share it up so that we get, I'm guessing there'll be another board meeting or two before we actually pull these things together, so you can go back and look at the questions and say, yeah, this gets it. So think just for a minute, and then we'll set up either through an email link or whatever, what are the questions? Because that's the key thing, really. If what you're trying to get is community input to review, reevaluate, and refine or change your priorities, what are the questions you want to know from these people? We just go write one down, or in a couple of minutes I'll go around. You can.
Could it be different though for different stakeholders?
Potentially.
Because I was just thinking with the graduates, it might look a little bit different than it would for a business person.
Right. And you may get, I think you'll have a few that'll be the same. And then I think there will be some that you might want to gauge specifically towards each group.
Okay.
I don't know what those would be yet. I mean, certainly recent graduates are probably good to ask about preparation, engagement, those types of things.
Yeah.
When you're doing your focus groups with some of your other districts, do you have quite a
4 questions is what we have. But right now, I'll just tell you, we're working at Johnson.
Okay.
There's 4 questions.
But-
What do you see as the strengths of the district? What do you see as the weaknesses of the district?
Mhm.
And then I don't remember the other 2, I just got them the other day, but their board said these are the 4 questions we want to ask.
What are your focus groups? Are you looking like?
We're looking at staff, students, business community.
Okay, you're looking at 3
We're not
then.
getting more people to speak up. If they're not all on the meeting. Sorry, 4 questions.
So what would be a
Did you
question?
work on your questions, or were you just chatting? No.
No.
What, give me a
Multitask.
Give me a few, and that'll help me.
I said, what have our schools forgotten to teach? That was broad, I know, but I learned from my first go around with it.
So I just go back to what unique assets of Gilbert do we need to leverage more?
Thinking of your question.
No,
I'm
I'm thinking of how I want to word this. Carrie and I went and met with the chamber because you were away.
World Series.
And we met with a business leadership group. So they represented lots of different businesses. And I guess the question that they kept coming up is, what do you wish our graduates knew that they don't? Or what skills are they missing, I guess, kind of to Deb's point.
I would love to ask that.
Not really what they didn't learn, but what skills are they missing?
So what do you wish our graduates, or what skills, or?
It's not what they want to know. What skills don't they have? Is it communication? Is it the soft skills? What are they?
What are they lacking?
Yeah, because they are.
All right, you kind of see it firsthand.
Oh.
don't you?
There are a lot of workforce development questions too that we ask a lot with future ready types of things. What are the 4 biggest soft skills that you need in your workplace? I mean, when you get your business and community people, and you probably have some of that already, or your CTE teachers have.
Right, and maybe if we have those, it's, the question becomes, how can we change our programming to do that, better, or whatever the case may be. It's some of the things that we know, well then let's change the question to say how, what's the best way we
You sent kids to Hunsaker? So I know John Kinley's got a bunch of data from employers there that they've used through those academies, so you might be able to leverage some of that.
I think it's really important, though, that we not distinguish soft skills being college-bound and work-bound.
Right.
Soft skills are soft skills, and our kids are lacking them.
Right.
The general public
life skills
is lacking them.
Right.
And so, where is that going to fall into play? Because you can have someone who scores a perfect score on their ACT, SAT, headed to Harvard, and they're missing some soft skills. And so we have to make sure that we're talking across the board, not dividing our kids.
The state's definition of college and career ready being one set of skills: achieve proficiency in essential content knowledge, acquired practical transition skills, which is the learning to be independent, whether it's to go to work or go to college, developing key learning skills and cognitive strategies that has to do with understanding my strengths and how I learn, and then strong foundation of self-understanding and engagement strategies. So there's a lot of different things that you can organize questions around there. What else? Where did I stop?
You said you're not
Right.
that
Well, I think, I mean, Kim really said the one I was thinking about. And I probably need to spend some more time thinking about this. I would love to hear like something around like, what are you curious about? I'm thinking about asking students that question specifically, but could be asked possibly in the inverse of that to patrons and parents, which is, what's an area that your kid is passionate or understimulated in school environments for? Some variation of that is fascinating to me. Admittedly, I'm probably not the right person to define these questions.
No, but that's so awesome because you hear a lot about capstone projects or senior projects or whatever. But what if we rephrased it and we allowed them time to do a passion project?
Hey, are you
Right?
solving this? Hey now.
Huh?
Are you solving this?
John?
No, I'm just. I
So,
mean, how cool would that be?
you know, for the parents group, I would be like, how do we better engage your kids in school? What is it that your kids enjoy in school, and what is it that you think we could do, or what's our opportunities? And then for the kids, it would be, you know, how would we get you better engaged in school, that you would like school better, and that just kind of that, what is it that we can get them that
Engagement.
Yeah, and I think that's more of a high school deal than elementary. My elementary, he just loves going to school. And, you know, it's not an issue. He loves it.
Beautiful.
Yeah, right. Jumps out of the car and is ready to go. And so I think there's a little bit of tailoring that we can do, but that's the essence of it. And then have an open answer for the, you know, just have a thing of any suggestions that you have with regard to, you know, 3 to 5 year priorities.
Yeah, and I don't know if it would be in general, but you know, some of the areas that we need to improve on. But I also like to hear, you know, some of the positives too. What are some of the things that we're doing well?
Because we can leverage it more.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think that's,
You don't want to stop doing
yeah,
what's
and I think that's important.
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah, you don't ever want to ask about any perceived weaknesses without identifying strengths
Right.
and assets.
And call them opportunities for improvement, or, you know, something that's a little nicer than weaknesses.
We say wells and betters.
Yes.
I mean, I call them the F word, or just failures, let's just call it out.
So what we would do then is you help us identify the people that should be in the room, we'll clarify the roles, we'll finalize the questions, we'll explain the purpose, we'll collect the data, we'll analyze it to a certain extent, we'll give it back to you, and then you can, if you want to be facilitated then and how to incorporate that data into new priorities, that we can help with that, or you can do it on your own too. You know, one of the things I want to emphasize one more time too, and I'm glad I think Tyler mentioned it earlier, this is far more guiding than what I typically see when I go into school districts. So I mean, I think it's important to say, you know, it's not that the board and administration have been asleep at the switch, it's just that you're trying to put a renewed focus on community involvement, which I think is good. So I would suggest that as part of the focus group or prior to, we give people, you know, maybe we don't go all the way back to 15, but give them some historical, here's what we've been about, here's what we're currently about, and then ask these questions, and we'll then be the board's responsibility to take that feedback. And I think the format is good. Do you want to just try to continue with this as people understand it, or do you want to work on a process?
I've asked Carrie to share what the 18-19 goals.
Get those
with the
put in the
group,
similar
get them,
format.
yeah,
So
and
we'll
get them
just
into
sign
a poster.
So, yeah, we put those for you, or you got to print out?
You did.
Okay,
You did.
so send those over, we'll get it printed up, and we can show people kind of what the recent history is. And I'll put together, are you working tomorrow? Sorry. You guys are off, aren't you? I'll put together some questions and I'll send them.
That's fine.
And then we can start to massage what they ought to be. We can't have 20.
No.
What number should we be looking at, John? do you think?
I'm going to say, depending on the length of the focus group, I've seen anything from 4 to probably 8.
Okay.
But they're very open-ended.
Right, and you can start with 16 and weasel them down to 8.
Right.
too,
Well,
saying,
yeah, and
gosh,
you might
that
want to,
fits
and
the
you can
products.
wordsmith some, or if you really suddenly think, oh, wow, this is really what we want to know, get that to Lindsay or somebody, and he'll send it to me, and we'll get that in the format.
Yeah. And if you kind of keep that open-ended thing at the bottom, then, you know, anything, question we didn't ask, if somebody feels passionate about something, you know, we can pick it up there.
And then we can take those, it's easy to take the questions, put them in a Google Doc. If you want to send it to people that can't come, email it to them,
Or like
That's
Brian
up to
said,
you.
send them out ahead of time, because people want to be thinking.
That's not a bad idea. These are the questions we're going to be asking. In fact, send out, here's a recent history.
Yeah.
Mhm.
This is the purpose of the
Yeah,
activity.
and even if you can't
Here's
be
the
there,
questions we'll be asking.
shoot your idea in and.
Send an email.
Yeah.
Okay.
Excellent.
And if you could all just send me names of folks that, you know, business people, government officials, some students if you've got them, and we'll talk to. I think that I asked for the administrators and for some names, and really just people who have in-depth conversations with them, but maybe don't participate in our activities on a regular basis. They haven't been able to be a part of SIAC or some other things. And so.
How often does your SIAC meet? Annually, monthly,
No,
quarterly?
quarterly.
I think 3 times, yeah, 3 times in the school year,
Three.
if I recall, right?
Because this is a process that can be refreshed through that group. Like you said, if somebody had mentioned, if we got people that are really engaged that we really need to hear from, I mean, you can get them onto that. Or
I think you heard Kim and Tyler, they have the longevity on the board from the standpoint of we have, that's one of the things that we haven't done probably job well enough is taking that input from our community. And I think that this will be, I think this will be welcome, to be honest with you.
Yeah. Yeah, we need to hear it.
All right, well, this sounds good. I want to just mindful of time here.
Yep.
I have what I need for now.
Okay, excellent. And you kind of have good next steps, and you guys are going to coordinate?
Yep.
Fantastic. All right, well, I guess in that case,
Move to adjourn.
thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, all in favor of ending?
Aye.
All right, stand approved. We are out of this work session. Thank you all. Thank you for your help on this.